Hey everyone, it's Veroosh. Sorry about that. My mic was off, but now it's on. Welcome to my channel. I'm excited to be here with you guys today to talk about the new moon in Cancer that's happening just now. So it just happened about half an hour ago, and there's lots to talk about, and I'm excited to be here to tell you all about it. So I've posted a podcast style video for members already. So if you're a member, there's a deep dive podcast thing that you guys are get to listen to, and it's available for all members. So if you're not a member and you want to get the lower tier to hear more, I really encourage it, because this new moon is very, very important. This new moon, in my opinion, it's the biggest new moon that I remember seeing when I was doing readings for you guys. It hits me particularly hard when I look at the chart. It really feels like there's a lot going on, and it's, I think, quite important. So the problem with it is that there are a lot of little pieces of information for us to understand in order to relate to it well. And that's a problem, because we want to do an all sign today, and I'm really worried about time. And so that's why I did the members podcast. It was a way for me to test how long this information would take to relate. And it took an hour. So I really don't want the general audience to miss out on this information. So what may happen is that we're going to talk about the astrology first, and if it reaches the hour, then I may come back tomorrow and do the all sign for it, because we really want to take a look at this energy, and we don't want to miss the astrology on this one. So this may be just an astrology overview, and I'll find this out as I present this information. So in order to do that, and kind of still have some tarot cards available, I'm going to pull 10 cards for the collective, just so we have cards to look at as we're talking about the energies. And then I'll come back and we'll do an all sign. And so this is a video for everyone, of course, so this is going to be up for everyone to watch later as well. But I really recommend that you watch this astrology part. It's such an interesting set of transits. And look at this. We have the Two of Cups. That's Venus in Cancer. And we have the Nine of Cups. That's Jupiter in Pisces. We have the Fool, Uranus. So I'm going to pull 10 cards just for us to take a look at together. And if I feel up to it at the end of explaining the astrology, if it takes a lot of energy, and if I want to make it a super long video, I might just do the all sign. By the time it's posted, you guys will know which one it is. If you're watching live, just bear with me. And then we have the Hermit, and we have the Two of Pentacles. But one of the things, Hermit, Two of Pentacles, Seven of Rods. I'm really excited about it, and I'm a little nervous to tell you guys all about it, so just be patient with me. We have the King of Swords, and the link for the members only video is in the description. So, hey girl, hey. We have the Ten of Cups. These are beautiful cards that are coming through. And then we have the Ten of Swords. So we're getting ready to put an end to something, but I think it's going to turn out well anyway. This new moon is once in a lifetime sort of moment. It's not because there is a particularly unique transit going on or something that is otherworldly. But this new moon is bringing with it a lot of complex energies that are happening concurrently with it. So I'm going to tell you guys about it today. And some of these energies we're going to do focused readings on. So that means that when I get to it, I will tell you how that applies to you, and then we'll talk about it then, okay? And I'll tell you guys, we'll do a separate video. So the new moon is happening, or happened, at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time in the sign of Cancer. And so that's at 24 degrees, 54 minutes. In my chart, it might be 55 minutes. But I think it's 56 minutes. And that's important because it's almost the 25th degree of Cancer. This area of the chart is ruled by the moon. So this is the new moon once a year in which the moon is in rulership. So aside from all of this astrology that's going on, the moon is very powerful here. It's a very powerful position for the moon. It's the one time a year in which we get a new moon in its home sign, and it's a big reset energy because whenever the sun reaches a transit, it resets that transit. With the moon, this happens 13 times a year. However, with the new moon in Cancer, it's doubly powerful because it's in the moon's home sign. So no matter what sign what your sign is, this is important for you. And this is a deeply emotional new moon. This is a new moon that gets at the heart of things. And as you'll see in a moment when I explain the astrology to you, it has deep symbolic significance that's just going to add to the other transits that are happening right now and just make them pop, 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 and make them even more, great. The last time there was a new moon in this area of the sky was 2004, July 17th. So it's been almost 20 years, 19 years exactly, since there's been a new moon here. And that's important to keep in mind. That new moon, and I have the chart open so I can actually show you guys. I forgot that I did this. This is good. Okay, so this is the chart from 2004, and as you can see, the new moon happened at about 25 degrees of Cancer. As you can see, the chart is different. Pluto's in Sagittarius, Chiron is in Capricorn. Wow, that was a long time ago. And the North Node was actually still in Taurus that 19 years ago. So it was a little bit behind where it is now. However, the conjunction of the sun and moon happened at 25 degrees, and so it occupied the similar area of the sky as the new moon is today. A little fun fact, there hasn't been that many lunations, eclipses in recent years in these degrees. So this new moon, if you have, placements between about 20 to 30 degrees, let's say, of Cancer, this is a unique new moon because it's close to those placements. So it's important for all of us, but particularly for those of you who have those placements. Okay, so now let's go back to 2023. I'm not there yet. Okay. And so this area of the sky is also called the third decan. So each sign is divided into 3 parts, 1, 2, 3. And each one is ruled by a different planet. Now, in traditional astrology, this area of the chart is ruled by the moon. So we don't only have moon rulership in the sign of Cancer, we also have moon rulership in the third decan. So this makes it a real deep and juicy new moon for Cancer and for the moon itself, which is the seat of our emotions, the seat of our mind, and our inner processes, and all of those things that are so personal to us. And we see a lot of cards that have shown up, cup cards that are in one way or another depicting us really feeling fulfilled at this time, or maybe even happy. And there is, even in the 10 of Swords, an emotional experience of catharsis. To me, just so in case you're worried about this 10 of Swords here, I just want to preface this so that when we're, as I'm talking about other things, I think this 10 of Swords, in light of the other cards, essentially is you coming to terms and getting ready for the next stage. So if you're in a situation with someone or the circumstances you have in your life that have been emotionally difficult for you, I feel like this Ten of Swords is actually saying that this is the time when you finally feel ready to let go, move on, start your journey in a new direction. And this is really in alignment with the energy of this new moon in the third decan in Cancer that the moon rules. Now, when we consider the third decan in modern astrology, it gets even more interesting than that, because in modern astrology, the third decan is ruled by Neptune. And you'll see in a few minutes that Neptune is actually very, very important. And so I hope you guys realize this, or when you see it, you connect with that energy. A lot's been going on with the ocean, you guys. Haven't you guys noticed or paid attention? First of all, there was a major migrant tragedy on the Mediterranean in which hundreds of people lost their lives who were trying to get to safety and save their lives and leave terrible situations. That's been a tragedy that I think unparallels anything else that's been going on. And secondly, of course, the submarine disaster. There's just been so many nautical things up in the sky. And I'll tell you in a few minutes about how right now this new moon is actually showing us that some of this dark energy that's been going on with the oceans is being mitigated and improved by this new moon. So this may be the end of whatever's been going on in oceans by and large. And so this is how energy and spirituality works. Suddenly there is a wave, sorry for the pun, there's a wave of circumstances involving certain tropes or certain events that coincide around certain, metaphors or certain things that correlate together, such as the ocean, for example. And so in this case, we've had lots of very kind of dark things going on in open waters. And even with the heat waves that are hitting America, Europe, China, which are record-breaking heat waves, that is the also absence of water, right? So we have water, it's sort of messed up right now. And I think this new moon is a little bit of an improvement. And how that applies to our lives is that in emotions, which is connected with water, there may have been a significant amount of turbulent energy as well. And so that's how it manifests. In order to understand these things, you have to think really broadly. And so you see these things come up, and those are your signs and symbols that are emerging from world events. And maybe people have been frustrated around you, or maybe people have been acting in weird ways. And so this new moon, I think, is finally reaching the end of that trajectory of events, and maybe a bit of a turnaround. But, that's too much of a digression. Another thing that I wanted to point out really quick, and this is more for members, so if you're a member and you watched my deep dive, watch it, I'll go into greater detail there. There's a lot of discussions about how to do astrology, and I find that quite frustrating how some people engage in these discussions. Oftentimes it has a lot more to do with ego and with a popularity contest than actual consideration of the transits. So some people weaponize the discussion of astrology to try to seem more correct, like they're more professional than they are. In fact, in my opinion, it shows a lack of professionalism than professionalism. But again, let's not get into that. So in online astrology in general, there's these heated debates, and they're not really heated. Some people are trying to create these waves of opinions to overshadow others. It's very supremacist if you think about it. And so they weaponize their audiences and tell them incorrect information in order to proliferate their opinions about astrology. So first of all, if you like your system of how you read and whatnot, by all means do that. My issue with people who do those things is only in their accusations of others and suggesting that other professional or experienced people don't know what they're doing because they haven't understood that level yet. It oftentimes is. So in particular, cusps is an issue that's a pretty heated debate. And if your type of astrology does not embrace cusps, I understand there are certain variations of astrology that don't embrace cusps between signs, then by all means follow through with what you see is right. But I just wanted to point something out for you guys here using this new moon as an example, that cusps it's a bit of a misnomer to say that cusps don't exist, and someone who says that cusps exist is wrong. First of all, the original astrology emerged from the observation of different transits as a single points in the sky. Then over the centuries and millennia, people started to group certain objects together and form pictures in the sky, and this became the constellations, stars, and different clusters and asterisms and so forth. And there was a very steep learning curve that happened between the time when people began to observe the sky and see constellations, that's the grouping of the stars in the sky, and started to pull from that the concept of zodiac signs. So the merge from the observation of constellations for astrological purposes to the application of those constellations to zodiac signs was a very narrow amount of time. So once constellations were organized, people started attributing zodiac signs to them. And so zodiac signs are essentially constellations that are near the ecliptic plane that are connected with the seasons. And so these are specific constellations within a specific space, in it, area of space, okay? And so from this position, once the zodiac signs emerged, then later on, people started developing house systems. And I really don't want to talk about house systems because it's too complicated. I talked about it more with the members. And so, but specifically when we're talking about cusp signs, the popular narrative is that's being this misinformation that's being shared is that cusp signs don't exist because there's definitive boundaries between the different signs. And that's just incorrect, because when those original constellations were developed, their boundaries have shifted over time, back then and to modern day. So they were very fluid. And originally, before zodiac signs, those constellations were very malleable between different cultures and different astrologers, and there was updates and changes to it. And so these are just a diagram of a 3D space. So it's our perception of the stars, which is a 2D perception because of scale, right? They're far away. And those stars aren't necessarily together as we have grouped them. This is just our way to organize the sky. And so when you're talking about zodiac signs being cusps and being incorrect, that's historically inaccurate. If you want to have firm lines between the zodiac signs, by all means do that if you like that. But to say that cusps are incorrect is historically inaccurate, because the foundation from which zodiac signs emerged was this malleable space between constellations. To add to this, no system of astrology, be it tropical or sidereal, exactly reflects the position of the stars anyway. And I explain that to the members in greater detail, so let's just skip over that. Watch the video. I think it's only $2 if you want to watch it, if you're interested in learning more. And so essentially it's just wrong for someone to say that cusps are incorrect. And if it's not what you practice, that's fine, but don't tell others that it's incorrect, because it's historically inaccurate. Now, in order for people who are new to learn about this more, I just really want to share this because this is a great example. We have a 25-degree new moon today in Cancer. Now, this is in the tropical system that coincides with the seasons. When we switch to the sidereal system, this new moon is happening at 1 degree of Cancer. So it's still in the Cancer sign because it's so high up in tropical. It still is in the same zodiac sign of Cancer. However, when we look at the stars associated with this position, we're actually talking about stars in the constellation of Gemini. So I explain this in great detail for members. Go watch that there. But hopefully this gives you an understanding of the flow and the malleability of the sky. And so when people argue that this cannot be a cusp, you know, you're kind of playing with fallacies and making like weird statements that are not based in reality. It's just your opinion. So by all means, practice that if you like it, if your type of astrology warrants this, but the actual, I don't know, astronomy of it is not in alignment with your claims. So if you're a cusper, go be a cusper, and if you want to stay on your side of the zodiac, by all means do that. But I think the main thing to keep in mind that those constellations were not always the same shape, and they moved around quite a lot. So to say that the zodiac signs that derive from them have to be very fixed, it's a silly argument. So I just wanted to show you guys this example because this new moon is actually showing us how the new moon at the end of Cancer in the tropical system can be at the beginning of Cancer in the sidereal system, and then in terms of constellations is actually in Gemini constellation. So I thought that was pretty interesting to kind of have in mind. Which brings me to my next point. So let's go back to talking about the new moon. This new moon is connected with the Gemini constellation, and specifically the fixed star Pollux. So right before the moon reached the sun, it made a conjunction with Pollux, and Pollux is the immortal twin of the two great twins. And Castor was his brother, and Castor died, and there's many different myths, so I'm just summarizing them all together. And then Pollux sacrificed his immortality to be with his brother, and then as a tribute to that sacrifice, Jupiter placed both of them up in the sky as the constellation Gemini. So it's a beautiful story. Now this is quite a late version of the story. There's a lot of earlier versions of the Gemini twins in various different cultures. The one that I want to really point out is the correlation between the Gemini twins in this story and the eyes of Horus in ancient Egypt, so Old Kingdom Egypt, about 3000 BCE. So in 3000 BCE, the early Egyptians believed that Horus had two eyes, had one eye that was the sun and one eye that was the moon. And so these two eyes had independent deities that personified two aspects of the whole. So it's maybe not the direct, I actually believe it is the direct kind of blueprint for the story of the twins that was retold like a game of telephone and changed over time. But we have this concept of the cosmic duality of the sun and moon, which was probably, in all likelihood, the first astronomical observance that our ancestors made, probably 200,000 years ago. Astrology is very, very old, even though we have records that only go back a certain amount of time. So people watched the sun, they thought it was a god, and the rest is history, right? So in ancient Egypt, the two eyes of Horus, the eye of Ra and the eye of Horus, represented the sun and the moon. And in a way, the two Gemini twins also represent these two energies. Castor, the mortal twin that passed away, went down into the underworld where Pollux, the star where the moon is today, went down to bring him out, and then they come up and become the Gemini constellation in the sky, and they're visible. So beyond just the concept of the constellation, it's also symbolic of the sun and moon that sometimes are separated and sometimes travel together. So think about the lunation cycle. For example, with a new moon, we have the sun and moon together in the sky. They're in the same position. That's why we have a moon that we don't see, because it is within the rays of the sun and it's obstructed and you don't see it. And so, therefore, the twins are together in that sort of interpretation of the story. Another thing that I really like about thinking about it this way is that in the summer months, when we have the sun in Gemini, when we have the longest days of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, the twins, it's representative of the twins being together for the longest amount of time. They're not separated and they're not in the underworld. There's various stories, so if it's a little bit inconsistent, that's what we're talking about. And so in this way, this conjunction with Pollux of the moon is actually representative of our connection to the divine. There's this area of the sky in Cancer or Gemini is very, very spiritual. And so if you're a Gemini or a Cancer, you can get your goosebumps now, because this is the Pollux represents our connection to the divine, whatever we conceive it to be, the things that are bigger than us, and Castor represents our mortal selves. And it also represents the duality of spirit within us as well. So when we have this new moon all together alongside this energy, it's a very healing moment for all of us. So I hope you enjoy the little story, and I hope that by considering the conjunction to Pollux, you see the significance of this new moon. Now, going back to what I said about Neptune, I mentioned that there's been a lot of tragedy in the open seas. And right before this new moon happened, before the moon was with Pollux, there was a miracle that happened on the ocean, on the Pacific. And I was like, aha, there it is. So what happened was a man had gotten stranded in the southern Pacific with his dog for 2.5 months, I believe, 2 months or 3 months, somewhere in between that. And then finally they fished him out of the ocean. He survived, and like barely with a tan, because he would hide under his canopy and fish and eat raw fish and, salvage water. And he was so lucky to be alive. And excuse me. And when I saw that event happen and this person was sort of saved, I was like, aha, that energy of all these tragedies in the open ocean, the migrants, the submarine, all of these dark, dangerous things, suddenly there's salvation. And to me, that really connected with the energy of this new moon. So when I look at astrology, I connect it to world events. And so to me, this paints a picture of salvation, of something beautiful emerging. And so as for your personal astrology, whatever turbulent thing has been going on in your life, when with this new moon, there's this symbolism that's emerging of finally that pattern breaking in some way. So I really wanted to explain that in great detail. And I did go into more detail with members. So by all means, go watch that if you can. So let's go in through the astrology a bit. And for brevity, I'm just going to check the time. I'm going to tell you guys we're at half an hour already because there's a lot to say in order for everybody to be on the same page. So for brevity purposes, I'll name the transit and I'll say we'll talk about this separately, which means I'll make other content on it. It's just to acknowledge that it's affecting the new moon. So for example, Mars and Saturn are in opposition. It's almost at a midpoint to the position between the south node and the new moon, and Pluto and the north node. And so it's not quite the midpoint, but it is bringing in a lot of chaotic energy. This has been happening since before this new moon, and Saturn-Mars standoff is not an easy feat to deal with. Like I said, we'll talk about this in another video. But it can bring quite a lot of tension and chaos, a tug of rope, pushing of energies between each other. But alongside this new moon, we're also looking at an opposition to Pluto. And to me, these sets of transits connected with Pluto are some of the most important for this new moon. I actually expected something to happen because of this position. Pluto opposite any transit is a break in the system. Whether it's in your personal astrology or something mundane, something is breaking and transforming, often in violent, maybe not physical violence, but some kind of violent, abrupt way. Pluto also represents despotic energy, and so it is something like a tidal wave, like a big wave crashing down on you. The famous painting by the Japanese artist of the Great Wave, it's very famous, so I think it's from like the 17th century or 18th century, and I forget the artist's name. It really always reminds me of Pluto. In fact, in my first deck, I used that image as the representation of the Tower card, because it was, to me, a big crashing wave is very similar to Pluto's energy. And so Pluto in opposition to the new moon, Pluto crushes transits like the moon and Venus, completely obliterates them. But because the sun is here, there's a little bit of, there's resiliency to that energy. However, still, we are looking at events that might be unexpected, that might be overpowering. You might be dealing with despotic energies, which means like people who wield power in very overwhelming ways, and issues that you are experiencing with other people in which the power difference between you and them is so skewed in their favor. You might feel like you're touching upon issues with others that are overwhelming, that are non-negotiable, that are hard to accept. So basically, to a certain degree, your choice in a matter may be taken away from you. And this don't think in extremes, but you might notice that in your life at this time, there's a nuance of that happening. It's almost like being around a a temper tantrum of a 2-year-old. You can't control that wave. You can't control that energy. It doesn't mean that your life's going to fall apart, but you will pick up on situations and people that you're interacting with that may suddenly introduce this despotic type of energy to your interaction with them. And it's really important to pay attention to this opposition. And so in some way, the writing's going to be on the wall. This is how they're going to treat you. And maybe because of this, the 10 of Swords, you will in some way come out of this realizing that you need to change. And here we have the Hermit. So suddenly you make a huge decision because you realize the unfairness of it all, that somebody's taking advantage of you, that maybe something you've been tolerant towards, suddenly you see their despotic nature, suddenly the demands become too big and you're just like, no more. And so we have these oppositions that are in the sky right now. They're causing massive tension. And so it doesn't mean destruction for all, but it can mean your awareness is now coming into, you're coming into the awareness of imbalance in certain relationships and situations. And I would encourage you to pay attention to that. This is a blessing because you are being shown exactly which relationships are out of whack for you or out of balance. Okay. Now, I'm going to talk about two major, how do you say this? Astrological configurations. So first there's double Yod Key that's happening alongside this new moon. And so one of the yods or yods is I think maybe a little bit sinister, and one of them is actually very healing. So let me point out the sinister one to you first. Because the new moon is in Cancer, we're automatically dealing with relationships. From now until September, we are going to be going through relationship issues with others because Venus is turning retrograde on July 22nd. And so the first yod is the sextile between Pluto and Neptune. Remember, I told you Neptune is so important in today's astrology because it's the modern ruler of the third decan. And the focal point is on Venus, actually. And so to me, yod essentially is a laser beam of energy, a hyper focus of energy from the base of the sextile from which it emerges. So the energy here is being funneled and transferred onto Venus. And there's all this energy from Pluto and from Neptune hitting Venus, or coming down onto Venus, which is our emotions, relationships, love. And it's provoking it to have a reaction. And this is the sinister one because I believe the sextile between Pluto and Neptune is evoking here a sense of lack of clarity in relationships. There may be a push or a desire to make a decision. You might be feeling pushed into a romantic situation or pushed around within a romantic situation. You may be misled. There's Pluto, Neptune energies might create a manipulative environment where you're getting strong-armed towards making a certain decision. And so the reason I think this yod is a bit sinister is because I think it may be manipulating you, or something is, manipulating you to not actually choose what the heart wants, which is Venus. However, with Venus retrograde coming up, I think that that's all part of the story. And so maybe this is your wake-up call. If a relationship sucks, if a friend's not true, you suddenly might feel yourself really, it's like a friend who asks you to go out to party, which is Neptune, drinking and so forth, and is getting you to drink way more than you want to. And in that moment, you realize that that's not your friend. It's that type of situation. So it's not necessarily terrible, and it may lead to a wonderful outcome. However, it might feel uncomfortable, or you might feel pushed into something. You may also be seduced in such a way that you have to have this and you're not thinking clearly. So if you feel the rush to go after something, if you feel the rush to go claim something as yours and it's not truly yours, and if you really think about it, you know that's true. And I'm thinking mostly relationships, but Venus has also a lot to do with ownership. So if you're going after something or someone that's not truly yours right now, you may be pushing yourself in that direction off of Neptune and Pluto, and so pull back and try to take it easy, okay? Now, the second Yod I like a lot more, and that basis of that Yod is Venus and the South Node. So that's the second Yod of the double Yod Key. And so Neptune becomes the focal point. Remember, it's the modern ruler of the Cancer new moon. And so this is all connected. It's all working together. Now, the reason I really like this Yod is because Venus in the South Node, as opposed to the other one, this one is talking all about past relationships and how we feel about them, and learning and growing and moving forward. So this is a healing opportunity for whatever relationship issues you struggle with. And the focal point is Neptune. So all that confusion about past relationships, all the things that have hurt you in past relationships or interactions, friendships with others, emotional, social connections with other human beings, may have an opportunity to be dispelled. Now, for the double Yod Key, which is the configuration of the two Yods going in opposite directions, the important thing in that is that you have a split in attention. So it's not precise, but it's pretty close. You have one pointing here in Pisces and the other one pointing here almost in Virgo, but still in Leo. And so you have a push-pull energy once again between unhealthy desire, a toxic, push towards something possibly unhealthy, or Neptunian, deluded, drunk, with like limited clarity of vision. And then on the other hand, you have a sobering effect in which Neptune is being clarified by the base of past relationships and romantic situations. So the double Yod Key often represents a decision, and so you may be presented at this time with a decision between going after the unhealthy bad boy relationship that you have gone after time again, or go after someone who's actually good for your heart. So it's not about anybody else, but it's also about healing your past relationships. And this can happen within relationships if you're single. If you don't want relationships, that's fine too. This is more about your relationship to other people as a theme of your life. So think really broadly about that. So this is coinciding with the new moon because Neptune is ruling this new moon in the third decan. So it's just adding that energy to the new moon. Okay, so obviously you guys have heard about this. I've already put out some content about this already. So very soon we are going to have the nodes switch. By about in about an hour, the true node is going to switch into Aries and the south node is going to move into Libra. I made some short form videos, I'll link them in the description, that clarify this. There's actually a window of time in which two different calculations for the nodes happen. July 13th is when the mean node changes signs, and then true node switches signs today, coinciding with the new moon. And so again, there's a lot of misinformation about what this is. The answer is a little bit technical, but essentially the true node is a derivative of the mean node calculation. It's not independent. It's an estimate of where the true node is. The true node name sort of misrepresents what it is. It's fine to use the true node, but don't let people mislead you to think that it's more accurate, because as a derivative, it is an estimate calculated from the mean node. So the mean node is the larger calculation, and then the estimate is calculated from that number. And so, but however, because the new moon is happening today, it's very important for us to consider that this is coinciding with the new moon. And in fact, it is. I mean, 4 days difference, 13th of July to the 17th, is not a huge difference. And so again, it's one of these popularity contests that's covertly toxic. It's people who are trying to persuade others to think like them. If you're a new astrologer, I just want to say, I know a lot of people get co-opted into this. So I'm not watching videos or seeing people say things and thinking to myself, oh, this person doesn't know. I think it's a game of telephone in which the message gets lost along the way. And so you're not doing anything wrong. And I'm just sharing this with you so you know. I know who some of the villains are, people who are actually weaponizing these things in order to shame or do other things to other astrologers. It's usually people with a relatively low experience in astrology, and it's oftentimes people who have priorities that are outside of astrology, so they're not first and foremost astrologers. They have something going on the side, and so they're weaponizing it for social media credit, for clout, that kind of thing. But if you're an astrologer who heard this online and was educated in the wrong way, you know, no problem. We all make mistakes and it's fine. But do know that the mean node is actually the calculation from which the true node derives. And so it's okay to use the true node, but again, it's incorrect to say that the mean node is less precise, because mathematically that doesn't add up. Okay, again, sorry for the pun. So whatever node transition is happening here, there is a shift between Taurus and Aries, and we'll do a separate video on this because it's such a huge topic. But it's important to recognize that alongside the cusps of fixed signs to cardinal signs, we have this massive set of transitions, and it's coinciding alongside of Pluto retrograde, which is our outermost planet that we measure in astrology, and that is in the anaretic degree of Capricorn. And so we are in large cycles of change in these times. Now, let's go back to Pluto a bit. And again, this is going to be a separate video, separate content. However, Pluto is bending the nodes on August 3rd precisely, because it is the outermost planet. Its transit is very long, so it takes it a long time to get around the zodiac, and each transit it makes lasts a really long time because its transit is only 1 to 2 degrees a year. And so it is true that for a couple months now, Pluto has been in aspect, in a square, in the midpoint of the nodes. And this is where cusps actually come into the conversation as well, because if you don't consider cusps, then you're talking about out of bounds or out of sign, not out of bounds. And when you do consider that cusps are actually malleable historically, then you've seen this square happening for a while. So it's just validating those of you who believe that we've been under this Pluto square. And if you look at the world at large and what's going on with all of these different mundane astrology events, such as, hardship, war, economic upheaval, that is all a part of that whole system, and we'll talk about it separately. But I do want to acknowledge that alongside this opposition, the square to these nodes for Pluto is a part of a larger planetary cycle that began in 2010. So what happened in 2008? We had a big housing market crash, And in 2010, the North Node joined Pluto in Capricorn. It was about 4 degrees then. And this began a new planetary cycle of Pluto and the North Node. In 2019, we had the inverse when the South Node joined Pluto at about 22 degrees of Capricorn. This just predated the pandemic, but if you remember Jeffrey Epstein, the church burning in the Notre Dame in Paris, there was a lot of strange things happening in 2019 as a precursor to the pandemic. The energy was already weird. And so this is all a part of the planetary cycle between Pluto and the North Node. And this square is actually the last square before we begin our new cycle in 2027. So just understand these signs are changing signs, and we're shifting from the North Node in Taurus, which is historically difficult financially, or our physical systems that are frail tend to break down. And when the North Node moves into Aries, we are focusing on self-actualization wherever that is in your chart. And so we have this massive shift coinciding with a Pluto North Node planetary cycle that it's in its final stages. And this whole cycle in Capricorn is correlated to so much economic upheaval. What do I expect from this? And I'll get into this in another video. All of these financial things that have been going on in the world, even like the SWIFT system, politics, the soft power, which is economic pressures and sanctions on other countries, all of these different economic systems, that the housing bubble, the housing inflation, I should say, there's been a massive grift going on. And I explain this in detail for the members, so if you want to hear more about it, watch it there. But it's true that up until now, since 2008 and since 2010, we've been in a cycle of a grift where there has been more theft from everyday people than any other time in world history. It's like the people who hold power and money collectively got together and decided to gaslight all of us alongside these terrible events that have been happening. And so we have been collectively, all countries have been stolen from, and the wealthiest people in the world have become sort of unhinged in their reach for power, which is Pluto and money. This is the last quarter of that planetary cycle. The new cycle begins in Aquarius on November 30th, 2027. This means that from this point on until 2027, expect that crappery, and I'm using the kind word, but you know what I'm referring to, is going to quickly deteriorate and fracture in many different ways. And so whatever the grift, the stealing from the populations, the kind of reach for power and money, the kind of cutthroat behavior that has been happening, I would expect that certain systems drastically crumble between now and 2027 because of this position. And this is why I thought something would happen today, because there is so much pressure here on Pluto, and we're not out of the woods yet. Remember, the exact square is on August 3rd, but I am a little bit, I have peace of mind, because I actually was worried that when the North Node was in the 0 degree of Taurus, which has now ended, I thought that crash would happen. And in some ways it did, but it wasn't as dramatic or as drastic as what I think the possibility is. So we're not out of the woods yet. The fact that the North Node is no longer in Taurus is a good sign, but still we have this massive grand cross. And even now, for the rest of the day, tomorrow, we're still under this Grand Cross energy. And so there may be some type of catalyst event connected with this situation. On a personal level, we all have been dealing with interacting with systems and people that have a lot more power than us, that abuse power in relation to us in certain ways, whether it's in your relationship or work or whatever else. And so again, for you personally, between now and 2027, those systems of oppression are going to really break down. And today, or the next couple days before, you may have come into the realization about just how unfair certain dynamics have been, but it's all to do with power. So pay attention to that. So, it's a big deal. So I told you guys about the Grand Cross. So let's just move on from that. But I did want to show you one more chart that really is similar to today's, that has another Grand Cross that is similar to this energy. Excuse me. That's July 1st. That's a nice chart, by the way. July 1st was a good day. Too bad it's over. Let me show you guys another chart that is very similar to this one, and then we can carry on and finish up the reading. Okay. So this is a chart for 2017. So look back to 2017 in January. We had a new moon. Look at this at 20. It was actually at 22 degrees because the sun is here. So it was, there we go. I'm going to show you guys. Since I brought it up, let's just take a look at it together. And what do we see here? We have Uranus still in Aries in 2017 and Jupiter in Libra. And look at this Grand Cross. It's very similar. And there is Pluto alongside with the sun. This doesn't mean that it's a huge correlate to today's new moon, but there is a little bit of similarity here. So you may want to go back to 2017, and if you had big events that came up for you at that time, you may want to jot those back in your mind. When I bring this to mundane astrology, my mind is blown, because when you look at the world events that happened in January 2017, these are the actual seeds or the precursors to what we're dealing with now. Hear me out. So first, Trump was inaugurated. I'm not being political, but this grift that happened, this printing of the money, that was in his administration. So I'm not saying he's the only reason why things went the way they did, but the way that his whole presidency or his tenure and everyone who was involved in that, Republican and Democrat, who printed all the money, gave this whole rush for cash, so to speak, by corporations, began with his inauguration in 2017. There were preliminary decisions by the UK Supreme Court to trigger Brexit. And if you're British or European, but specifically British, there is a lot of concern that Brexit was out of the desire of many British people. Many people felt duped it was an election-based decision. It was a referendum, but at the same time, many people feel that the information was misrepresented to them, and many people are not happy about the fact that it happened. So Brexit is by no means like some free and clear freeing of the British people from the European Union. In fact, a lot of people feel that they were duped going into it. So again, the UK has experienced significant hardship, especially at the end of 2022 last year. There was considerable the cost of living is just gone through the roof. Per capita, British earnings are lower than the United States, and yet they pay more for goods and services. So, the hardship that people in Britain are experiencing is quite intense and has been intense. So the events that we're dealing now directly correlate to those early decisions about Brexit. Also, there was a ceasefire that ended in Syria, and this has led to great atrocities and great loss of life, particularly going back to earlier this spring with the earthquakes that happened in Turkey and Syria. You guys know that there was very little help for the Syrian people, and that was a world event that was just horrific. And so I'm not being political, just drawing the parallel how those events in 2017, when we were under this Grand Cross full moon in Cancer, really feel similar to the energy now. Also, the final one, in January 2017, the U.S. expelled 25 Russian diplomats for interference in the U.S. elections. Wild, right? Because right now, of course, there is a proxy war in Ukraine between Russia and the United States. Now, the conflict on paper is between Ukraine and Russia, but the U.S. is hugely involved, even if they downplay their participation. And so, again, not being political by saying this, just pointing out that these tensions have been around since 2017. So look back in your life, January 2017, what happened, and how does that thematically, how do those themes relate to now? I think it'll be very helpful for your understanding of this new moon. Okay, so I'm just going to bring the chart back to today, 2017. We were all such babies then. Feels like so long ago. Okay, so here we go. So here's our new moon here. So the last astrological observation that I'm going to make today, and this is going to be another video that we're going to cover, is the sextile between Pluto and Neptune. And so we already saw this working on the Yod, but let's focus on it as a standalone influence because Neptune is ruling this conjunction, this new moon, and it's very important to give it a nod. Now, Neptune and Pluto are the furthest away planets. Their planetary cycle is 500 years long, or 435 whatever years. It's long. And so because of this sextile actually emerged at the beginning of the 20th century, and they have fallen in and out of the proximity to each other for it to be a sextile. So sometimes they're a little bit closer to a sextile, sometimes they drift away, but they've been coming into a sextile with each other on and off since the beginning of the 20th century. So entire lives, your parents' lives, your grandparents' lives, so speaking of like big cycles that affect world politics and all of us, this sextile is our guidance. It is a marker of our civilization at this point. When people 300 years from now look back at this time, that's what they're going to be seeing, the sextile between Neptune and Pluto affecting world politics. So this goes beyond some Saturn transit, Uranus, temporary events. This is long hold affecting us a certain way. This sextile began in 1891, and again, we'll go into that in a dedicated video. But for our purposes, for this new moon, we need to recognize that this is the preamble. This is the preamble, the moment before the actual sextile forms again. So right now it's about 2 degrees off, but the exact sextile will begin to form over and over and over again between 2026 and 2032. And that's really, really significant astrologically. However, we're getting really close to a sextile. In fact, it's showing a sextile here. So this is the approach of a sextile that will form in 2026. What does that mean? Again, in the context of planetary cycles, we are hitting our first sextile in the planetary cycle that began in 1891. This is the first major aspect that Pluto and Neptune are forming since 1891. Mind you, it began in the early 1900s. And so this sextile is a marker, essentially saying this is where the world is going right now. So everything that is under its sphere right now, politically, everything from like World War II to, all the dynamics between the West and the Middle East, Russia and the United States, all of these the emergence of China, all of these Japanese supremacy, until the late 90s, economically speaking, all of these world events affecting all of us, Brexit, these huge movements are reflected by this. And so in a bigger scheme that will end in 2385, that's when the next cycle begins, we are underneath the influence of this interaction of these two planets. And so the first, a recent series of sextiles, because these sextiles between Pluto and Neptune last over several years because they're so slow and because they're so far away. The first series of sextiles began in 1980 and continued until 1986. And so now we're experiencing the next iteration of this in 2026 to 2032. However, right now, alongside this new moon, we have them coming slightly closer together, almost like Venus and Mars almost touched this year in Leo, but not quite, and they'll actually come together in 2024. The same thing, it's almost a perfect sextile. It's still going to show events that it's bringing about, but it's not the actual outcome yet. But it's important for us on a personal level to pay attention to, because whatever is emerging for you right now, alongside this new moon energy, is going to be emblematic of the events that happen in 2026 to 2032. So really pay attention to now. And if you saw my short form video, when I said this is like an eclipse, that pay attention to that, because it's not literally an eclipse, but it's bending the nodes. And it's because Pluto's there's this real kind of break in the water, some kind of a powerful shift that sort of sweeps us off in a new direction. And so this sextile between Neptune and Pluto is a part of this. And so whatever is emerging now in this theme. So the way to think about it for personal astrology is to consider what are your takeaways from your region of the world, because that's what you can connect with the best. What are the themes that predate your life? Let's say 1 generation or 2 generations back. What is the theme of your family? What is the theme of your community? What is the important stuff? Write down 5 things, very simple, like 1-sentence things. And then see what about those things is emerging for you right now in your life experiences in a very meta level sort of analysis. It's likely that between 2026 and 2032, there will be catalyst events that will be directly affecting those areas of your life. Okay, so now I'm just going to quickly go over what we've said. This is a summary. It's going to take 2 minutes. So we have a double Yod Key that is splitting the energy between Neptune and Venus. And Neptune is actually the energy that we want to focus on. It's very healing, as its foundation is the South Node and Venus. And so Neptune rules this new moon. And so therefore it is bringing clarity to personal relationships. Don't get wrapped up into what's going to be Venus retrograde in 5 days. Don't get wrapped up into sordid love affairs or difficult interactions that you just want to possess, control, and hold on to. Try to do some healing with this transit. And so with this new moon, there's this energy of healing. Now, the other very important thing is Pluto bending the nodes, which is a planetary cycle that has begun in 2010 and will continue until 2027. And so this is the position in which we will unpack all the grifting that has been going on, the loss of wealth, the loss of our resources by people who we don't know, who have more power than us, just helping themselves both legally and economically to our lives as individuals in the middle class or upper middle class, whatever you belong to. Lower class, it doesn't matter. So on a personal level, you will be contending with this energy between now and 2027 when the new cycle begins. This means that you may have the opportunity to confront, break down, or in some way relate to the injustice that you have been experiencing. The new moon is under a major grand cross, and it itself is bending the nodes that are actually switching signs. And to me, this is really, again, this break in the water, a sudden change, abrupt happening in your personal life that may be emerging. Then we have the sextile between Pluto and Neptune. This goes back to 1891, but it's probably your entire life. The Pluto and Neptune have been coming into and out of these sextiles. And so once again, you're getting a vision of the future here of 2026 to 2032 when the sextile actually becomes exact. So whatever is coming up for you now in relation to Pluto and Neptune, which is the big meta things, structures that govern your life, this is going to get accentuated. And so how you want to relate to that, you want to figure out how you want to relate to that. And I'll do a dedicated video to break down exactly what that means in another video if it's not clear. But think about the meta structures that overwhelm your life, manipulation tactics that you interact with power systems like companies taking advantage of you, governments taking advantage of you. Those kinds of things will be negotiated. And may increase from 2026 to 2032. So it's a good idea to pay attention now. What's really annoying and feeling unjust right now? Because in 2026 to 2032, you may draw a personal boundary and say, this is not okay. And then Venus is entering retrograde. We've already talked about this, and we talked about the close approach of Mars and Venus in Leo, but the exact conjunction will be in 2024. So all those personal issues that have been happening for us in our life are about to be resolved. It's not really a great time to take on new things, but if there are things that you want to address, resolve, and figure out, this is the right time for it. I just want to acknowledge the story and remind you guys of the fixed star, the Gemini twins, about the divine intervention of Pollux. And also that man, and I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but the man in the Pacific Ocean that was lost at sea for months all end, survived, and now is being brought back to society with his dog. He helped his dog survive too. Good for him. And so this I think, so don't be worried about this new moon. I think that the overall idea is confronting all of these things that are happening, and there is a intervention here. And even if you're an atheist, consider it a turning for the better, a moment in which we get our opportunity to push back, to assert ourselves into what we truly want and need. And that is actually, and that is actually very representational of the North Node in Aries. So we're on track with this, and we'll talk about the North Node in Aries, South Node in Libra. I think we're ready to go for it. I think we're ready to take it all on. The last thing I wanted to bring up, and of course this has been a long explanation yet again, but this is probably the most important new moon video I've ever done, so it's worth the energy. when I was looking back at previous events that happened in this area of the sky, I noticed that there was an eclipse. There's actually not been that much activity in this area of the sky in terms of lunations, eclipses, all those sorts of things. But there was a solar eclipse on July 15th, 1776 at 23 degrees of Cancer, which is about 1 degree off of today's new moon. This was 2 weeks after the Declaration of Independence was signed in America. And so to me, that just, set my mind completely wandering, and it blew my mind. And so all of these things that we're talking about, Pluto, Neptune, these are state things. Even Saturn, Mars opposition, these are big things happening, coincide with this eclipse that happened in 1776. And if you are a member, you've been a member, and you caught my Plutocracy, American Revolution videos, there's two. There's one called Plutocracy, and there's one called the American Revolution. I actually talked about this and about how Pluto is actually returning to the same position in the sky in the sidereal system, not in tropical, that it was when the Declaration of Independence was signed. So when you are considering the actual Pluto return based on the sidereal system, it's actually happening now. So we're in the midst of the real American Revolution Pluto return. And the fact that this eclipse happened in 1776, just 2 weeks after the Declaration was signed, I feel like and America is the hegemon of the world, and so therefore it applies to everyone else what happens in America. And so I think, I'm not saying it's some terrible event, but I think that we are revisiting the context in which the American independence was signed, the Declaration of Independence, and the revolution happened, and we're all collectively thinking about what kind of world we want to live in. There is a rush for power, but there's also a huge rush to defend ourselves from unjust power, in the spirit of which the Declaration of Independence was written. And so therefore, I feel like this new moon is just chef's kiss. It's powerful. And so thank you for hearing me out. As you can hear, I was very excited to tell you guys about it. And so I hope you feel like it's been worth your time. Tomorrow I'll come back and do a all sign, because I think that today we've had enough. But it's probably one of the most important videos for us to consider. And so I hope you do pay attention. Ironically, this version is longer than the members only video, but I did focus on different things each time I explained it. So if you're a member, I still recommend that you watch it. I'll put a link for the members video in the description, and then I'll also put a link for the Plutocracy video and the American Revolution video. We'll be talking more about this as Pluto enters into Aquarius again. So let's just go back to the cards. I mean, we overshot an hour anyway, so might as well just really dig in and have a look and see. So all of these different qualities that we saw in the new moon energies, it's really independent, right? It's taking a look at the power. It's how our whole system is designed. It is talking about the systemic ways we live our life in terms of politics, society, but also in our interaction with other people, how you've set up your relationships with others, and who you are now. I think you're getting in touch with a deep sense of happiness, which is actually allowing you to challenge certain things that you may, if you give somebody a carrot or peanuts, right? You incentivize them to accept less so that they don't ask for more. And maybe in the grand scheme of things, we have been ripped away from some of our privileges individually, and we have been stolen from, or some other terrible things have disempowered us. But maybe there's something that has emerged within us that is radical. This is Uranus, right? So the Fool. There's something within us that has emerged that is radical in nature. And so maybe in 2017, we weren't prepared to challenge the system, our relationships, and people around us as much as we are ready to challenge them now. And maybe between then and now, we have been stripped down bare bones to what we are now, and maybe we're all collectively and individually more radical, more ready to say the big F you to the people that are nickel and diming us, that are giving us peanuts and having us live uncomfortably for their benefit. And so we have this position of the Two of Cups, Nine of Cups, radical self-contentment that is actually causing you to feel ready to cut the ties from those systems that are so unfair. And this will be in your personal relationships. This will be in a bigger scheme of things as well. So it looks as though big moves are happening, and I hope you feel excited about it. Some people ask me about manifestation. I really think that alongside this new moon, you want to chill as much as possible because you don't know what you're signing up for. There's a lot of energies ahead. So it's like a pinball game. You might be in a good energy to set something in motion right now, but the energies coming up over the next 10 years are wild. And are you sure you want to set intention in that way? Are you sure you want to rock the boat, so to speak? So think about that. In terms of charging your crystals, someone asked me about that as well. Perfectly good time to charge your crystals. So you can do manifestation. You can, go back to your ex. You can do all these things right now, but in extreme times will lead to extreme consequences. So at least be prepared for doing that. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed. This has been so long, but kind of exciting to talk about. So I hope you found it exciting as well. And I'll be back tomorrow for the all signs portion and more content coming up. But I hope you found this inspiring. I hope you're excited about this new moon. It's going to lead us in good directions. And so I wish you guys all the best on this new moon. I'm glad to be back, and I really appreciate all of you. Thank you. Bye.